Before we begin, let the silence settle around you. Not the kind you hear, the kind you feel crawling into the corners of the room. The story I'm about to tell wasn't meant to be spoken out loud. Someone carried it alone for far too long, afraid that saying it would make it real again. If a piece of their truth touches something you've kept buried, you can tell me in the comments. And if these quiet shadows keep pulling you back, you can like the video, subscribe, and tap the bell icon. Now don't move. Some memories wake up when they're listened to. I should start by saying that I don't scare easily. I've traveled alone across cities, stayed in questionable hostels, and dealt with more than a few creepy situations. But nothing prepared me for what happened in room 213 of that old hostel. I had booked the place last minute because everything else was full for Halloween weekend. I didn't mind the peeling paint or the strange reviews mentioning night noises. It was cheap, close to the bus station, and I wasn't planning to spend much time inside. When I arrived, the lobby smelled faintly of old cigarettes and detergent. A dusty fan squeaked overhead as if struggling to stay alive. The receptionist, a thin man with tired eyes, froze when I gave him my name. "Room 213? He repeated, tapping slowly on the dusty register. "Yes," I said, expecting him to hand over the key, but he hesitated. His fingers hovered above the metal tag. "That room has a history," he murmured. "If you hear anything strange, don't ignore it." I laughed it off. "It's fine. I've stayed in worse." He didn't smile. He pushed the key toward me with 2 fingers, like he didn't want to touch it any longer than necessary. The corridor leading to the room was long and dim. The yellow bulbs flickered, casting soft pulses of shadow along the narrow walls. The carpet smelled like old rain, wet, sour, and somehow earthy. When I reached the door to room 213, I noticed the number plate hung slightly crooked, like someone had tried to pull it off. The moment I stepped inside, I felt it. The air was heavier, cooler by at least 10 degrees. My skin prickled. The room wasn't dirty, not exactly, but everything felt displaced. The bed was neatly made, but the blanket had deep creases, as if someone heavy had been lying on it moments before. The wardrobe doors were shut, but not fully aligned. And that smell, damp soil, the scent of earth freshly dug up, hung faintly in the corners of the room. I dropped my bag on the bed and shook off the unease. Hostels are always weird, I told myself. Rooms smell like old guests, old problems. I showered, changed, and tried to relax. By midnight, the building had quieted down. People had either gone out to Halloween parties or fallen asleep. I dimmed the lights and climbed into bed, scrolling on my phone to distract myself. That was when I heard a soft creak. I looked up. One of the wardrobe doors had opened about an inch. I stared at it for a moment, then got up, closed it, and twisted the tiny lock on the handle. It clicked shut with a satisfying snap. I even tugged it once to make sure it was secure. Then I went back to bed. But about 15 minutes later, there was another creak, soft, deliberate. I looked again. The wardrobe door was open. Not wide, just a small gap, as if someone was watching me from the darkness inside. A shiver ran through my legs. I got up again, forced the door shut, and checked the lock. It was intact. I told myself the frame must be loose or the building settling. Whatever excuse kept me from thinking too much. I turned off the light, rolled over, and tried to sleep. Eventually, exhaustion pulled me under. When I woke the next morning, the wardrobe was closed. I convinced myself it had all been imagination. But that was only the first night. The second night was different. The atmosphere in the room felt tense, as if the air was holding its breath. Even my phone flashlight seemed weaker, like the darkness in room 213 was thicker than normal shadows. That damp soil smell was stronger now. When I turned off the lights, the scent hit me sharply, making my throat tighten. I opened the window to air it out, but the smell didn't fade. I left the light on as long as I could. Around 3 a.m., I finally gave in to sleep. I don't know how long I was out before something pulled me awake. Not a noise, not a movement, presence. Someone was breathing beside my bed. Slow, heavy, raspy breathing, like lungs full of phlegm or dirt. The hair on my arms lifted. I didn't move at first. I didn't even open my eyes. I just lay there, pretending to sleep while listening to that wet, labored inhale and exhale inches from my face. My heart hammered so hard I felt it shake the mattress. I forced my hand under the blanket toward my phone. My fingers were trembling so badly I nearly dropped it. I didn't dare sit up. I simply tilted the screen upward and pressed the side button. The flashlight came on. The breathing stopped. I scanned the room wildly. No one. Nothing. Just the cracked white walls and my half-open suitcase. But then I saw the wardrobe. Wide open. And the inside, it wasn't wooden anymore. Not clean. Not empty. The interior walls were smeared with mud. Thick, dark, wet mud. Clumps of it had fallen onto the floor in front of the wardrobe like something had dragged itself out. My stomach twisted and instinct took over. I grabbed my phone and backed into the far corner of the room, keeping the light pointed at the wardrobe. My breath was shaking. My skin felt icy, like all the heat had left my body at once. Something had been inside there with me. I didn't sleep again that night. I sat in the corner, knees to my chest, freezing, terrified to blink. At dawn, I went to the front desk. The receptionist looked at me, really looked, and his expression tightened. "It opened again, didn't it?" he asked softly. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He sighed and rubbed his temples. "That room. People don't stay long. Why does it smell like dirt?" I asked. My voice sounded thin, shaky. "What happened in there?" He hesitated, then said, "Years ago, 3 migrant workers stayed in that room. They were cheap labor for a construction project nearby. They never left. No one knows exactly what happened, but when people finally broke in, the floor under the wardrobe was dug up. Fresh dirt, like a grave." I stared at him. A grave. They think the bodies were hidden there. But when the police came, the hole was empty. Empty. The word echoed in my ears like a pulse. I didn't go back to the room. I packed in 5 minutes, never taking my eyes off the wardrobe even once. I recorded the room on my phone while I packed, more for my sanity than evidence. Later, when I played the video back, I heard something. A whisper, hoarse, layered with dirt and breath. "You shouldn't stay here. We need the room." I checked out immediately and never looked back. But 2 nights ago, I woke up in my own apartment to the same smell. Damp soil. And this morning, when I left for work, my wardrobe door, one I never leave open, was cracked an inch. Just enough for something to slip out. I've stayed in dozens of hostels across different countries, and I've learned one thing. The cheaper the place, the more interesting the people. That's the only reason I didn't think twice about booking that rundown hostel tucked between 2 mechanic shops on the outskirts of the city. I was backpacking alone, moving from place to place with no real plan except to chase cheap rooms, good stories, and the freedom of not belonging anywhere in particular. I arrived on October 29th, shaking rainwater off my jacket. The lobby smelled of damp laundry and something faintly metallic, like rust or old pipes bleeding slowly inside the walls. The lighting was dim, the kind that flickered just enough to make you blink. I didn't expect to meet someone like Milo there. He was in the kitchen when I first saw him, crouched near the kettle like he'd forgotten how to stand up straight. Pale, quiet, a thin frame swallowed by an oversized black hoodie. The hood was always up, casting a shadow over his eyes, but he wasn't unfriendly. When he saw me struggling with the broken stove lighter, he simply reached over and handed me his tea candle. "You have to ignite it from this side," he murmured, his voice so low I almost missed it. "The gas leaks on the left." He wasn't wrong. 1 spark later, the burner lit. That was how we started talking. He told me his name, Milo, and asked about my travels. He didn't offer much about himself except small pieces. Where he'd been, hostels he'd stayed in, places he still wanted to see. His voice always hovered just above a whisper, but he had this strange way of speaking like he was remembering things from far away, not describing places he'd actually been. We bonded over tea and horror stories. Felt fitting, considering Halloween was only 2 nights away. But people whispered in that hostel. Guests shuffled past each other with sideways glances and lowered voices. I first heard Milo's name from a group of German students in the hallway. One of them asked, "Is he still sleeping in the corner bunk?" Another said, "Man, that's creepy. Doesn't anyone tell new people about him?" I assumed they meant his personality, quiet, awkward, maybe socially anxious. So I ignored it. That changed the next morning. I found 2 girls in the kitchen arguing about the empty bed in room 103. The one with blue hair waved her spoon dramatically. "I swear someone slept there last night. I heard talking from that bunk, but when I checked, no one was there." Her friend shivered. "That bed's been empty for 3 years. 3 years. That got my attention. I asked them what they meant, and they told me the story. A backpacker, young, traveling alone, had checked in, stayed a week, and then nothing. He stopped showing up for breakfast. Didn't check out. Didn't pick up his passport from the front desk safe. His bag was found under the bunk, but he never turned up. People assumed he walked out and vanished into the city or crossed the border. But the hostel staff quietly admitted something else. The room had a history of complaints. Guests reported cold spots, shadows, whispers. The bed the missing traveler used had a reputation. No one wanted it anymore. It was the same bed Milo slept in. I wanted to laugh, but the story felt wrong. Not spooky, just sad. Still, when I asked other guests about Milo, their reactions were confusing. "Who? I haven't seen anyone in a hoodie. That bunk? No one sleeps there." I chalked it up to people not paying attention. But the feeling inside the hostel changed after that. Tiny things I had brushed off before suddenly echoed louder in my mind. Whenever Milo walked into a room, the temperature seemed to dip slightly. Not cold enough to panic, just enough to notice the difference. He moved quietly, not just light-footed, but silent. No footsteps on the old wooden floors. No sound of him shifting on his bunk. And he always wore the same hoodie. Same wrinkled sleeves. Same faint dark stain on the cuff, like dried mud or something darker. On Halloween night, everything spiraled. It was late, around 1 a.m. A storm rattled the windows and set the old building groaning. Most of the guests had gone out drinking. Only a few stayed behind. Milo and I were in the kitchen again, sitting across from each other at the scratched wooden table. The lights flickered, the kettle hissed, and the room smelled like boiled water and rain-soaked grit. He was unusually quiet even for him. I told him he looked tired. He didn't smile. He just said, "Sometimes it's hard to rest." When the kettle clicked off, I got up to pour us tea. As I leaned toward the microwave to grab 2 mugs, I froze. In the microwave's reflective glass, I saw myself. And standing directly behind me was Milo. His hood was up, head tilted slightly. His face was pale, hollow, and his eyes, sunken, dark, almost bruised looking. But the room behind me was empty. I turned around so fast I nearly slipped. Nothing, just the humming refrigerator and the flickering light. I stood there, gripping the counter, feeling the sting of cold sweat running down my back. My breath came out uneven. My hands shook. Then, from behind me, a voice whispered, "You saw me." I turned slowly. Milo was sitting where he'd been before, hands wrapped around his mug, eyes hidden under the hood. He hadn't moved. My throat tightened. What's going on?" He lifted his head slightly. For the first time, I saw the full shape of his face in the dim kitchen light. He wasn't just pale. He looked drained, like something hollowed him out. "I didn't leave," he said. "They think I left, but I didn't. They buried me here." The lights flickered violently. The kettle rattled. A cold gust swept through the kitchen, smelling of thick soil and something raw. Milo's voice dropped to a trembling whisper. "Help me get out." I backed away. My legs hit the cabinet behind me. My heartbeat was a panic drum in my ears. "Milo, what are you talking about?" He stood up. The air around him rippled like heat waves, except it was cold. Bitter, earth-soaked cold. His hoodie flickered at the edges, almost fading into the shadows behind him. "I'm still here," he said. Under the floor. They never looked deep enough. The ground beneath me vibrated. Not like footsteps, more like something shifting under the tiles. Pushing, straining, crawling upward. The tiles under the table cracked. Thin lines spread across the floor like the ground was about to split open. The smell of wet soil surged, pungent and suffocating. "I can't leave," he whispered. "Not until someone finds me." I stumbled out of the kitchen, almost tripping over my own feet. The hallway lights buzzed, dimmed, and went black. Behind me, I heard the scrape of something heavy sliding across the floor. When I reached the stairs, I made the mistake of looking back. Milo was standing at the end of the hallway, or rather, he was flickering there, like a glitch in reality, fading in and out of the shadows. His voice carried down the corridor, thin and broken. "Don't leave me here." I didn't stop running until I hit the street. I left my backpack, my passport, everything. I still haven't gone back for them. But last night, the smell of damp soil filled my apartment. And when I woke up this morning, there was mud under my bed. I should begin by saying I'm not usually afraid of dark places. I grew up in a house where the power went out every other night, where shadows moved across walls lit only by candlelight. But something about basement spaces has always unsettled me. The stale air, the concrete smell, the way sounds echo like they belong to someone else. Even then, I never imagined the basement showers of that hostel would leave me with nightmares I still can't shower away. When I arrived at the hostel, the receptionist apologized immediately. "Upper floor showers are down. Plumbing issue. You'll have to use the basement ones for a few days." She said it casually, but the other guests groaned like they'd been avoiding that place for as long as possible. I didn't understand the fuss until I went down there myself. Not to bathe, but to store my luggage. The door was heavy metal, colder than the rest of the building, and the hallway behind it descended at a slight angle, swallowing light as if it was hungry. Even in daylight, the fluorescent bulbs down there buzzed and flickered like they were trying to stay awake. So when my turn came to shower that night, I hesitated. My skin felt grimy from travel, and I hated going to bed sticky, so I forced myself to grab my towel and toiletries. The staircase creaked with every step as I made my way down. The temperature dropped noticeably, the kind of cold that sticks to your bones, not your skin. I could smell rust and something wetter, deeper, like old drains that had been left alone too long. The basement door thudded shut behind me. The shower room wasn't large. 6 stalls, cracked tiles, weak yellow lights that made the steam look dirty. Water dripped constantly from one broken faucet, echoing in a slow rhythm that made the silence between each drop stretch too far. I chose the stall farthest from the entrance. Habit. I like corners, fewer directions for things to come from. The water took forever to warm up. For a while it ran icy, needle-sharp, making my breath hitch. Finally it warmed to something tolerable, fogging the tiny cubicle. Just as I relaxed beneath the stream, someone else entered the basement. Light footsteps, slow, deliberate. I heard a towel rustle, a shower curtain slide, then humming, soft, low, almost tuneful, coming from the stall next to mine. I didn't think anything of it at first. People hum in showers. Maybe it made the place less creepy for them too. But something was strange about the sound. It wasn't quite a melody, more like someone humming to themselves to stay calm, or distract themselves. I bent down to grab my shampoo bottle, and curiosity nudged me. Just a harmless glance under the partition. No feet, nothing, just cracked concrete and a slow-moving puddle of water. The humming continued. My stomach tightened. "Hello," I called softly, trying to sound normal. "Is anyone there?" The humming stopped. Silence filled the room like thick smoke. Then the voice returned, lower this time. Not humming. A sound halfway between a gurgle and a sob, like someone trying to cry while underwater. A chill pricked the back of my neck. My fingers trembled around the shampoo bottle. Peeked again. Still no feet. The gurgling cry grew louder, closer, wet. It sounded like someone choking on water, or something thicker. I turned off my shower immediately, hands shaking as I fumbled with the faucet. The moment the stream stopped, the other sounds stopped too. Dead silence. All I could hear was my breath and the distant pipe hiss behind the walls. I wrapped my towel around myself, trying not to think, trying not to give shape to the dread crawling up my spine. I grabbed my clothes, shoved everything into my bag, and yanked the curtain aside, only to slip the moment my foot hit the floor. Not on water, on footprints, wet ones, human ones. A trail of them leading from the stall I thought was empty. The prints were fresh, dripping, uneven, like someone had been dragging their feet. They stopped just inches behind where I'd been standing. My pulse exploded. I scrambled backward on hands and heels, kicking water, towel half falling off. The air suddenly smelled like something rotting in a wet basement. Mold, mildew, and something sourer, like old sweat left to decay. And then, a cold finger brushed my shoulder. Not air, not a draft, a touch. I jerked so violently that I slammed into the wall, pain shooting up my arm. The lights overhead flickered violently. Once, twice, then everything went black. I was blind. The darkness wasn't just the absence of light. It felt thick, as if something had stepped in front of the bulbs, blocking them out with its body. I could hear water dripping, louder now, faster, like dozens of drops hitting the floor at once. And something else, breathing, ragged, uneven, right next to me. I couldn't move. Fear glued me to the tiles. My throat locked. My body felt like it was shrinking into itself. A whisper slid through the darkness. So close I felt it brush my ear. Don't leave me. My muscles finally loosened in sheer terror. I bolted toward where I hoped the door was, arms outstretched, stumbling in the dark. My foot hit someone. Something. I don't know. It felt like a cold shin, as if someone was standing directly in my way. But I pushed past. The basement door was further than I remembered, or maybe panic stretched the hallway into something longer. My towel fell. My bag dragged behind me, bare feet slapping wet concrete, lungs burning. Behind me, the breathing followed. Fast, desperate. I didn't dare look. I slammed into the staircase, ran up the first 3 steps, slipped, clawed my way up the rest. My fingers were shaking so badly I missed the doorknob twice before wrenching the upstairs door open. Light spilled into the stairwell. Warm, bright, normal light. The moment it touched my skin, the breathing stopped. I slammed the door shut and leaned against it, gasping, dripping, shaking uncontrollably. I was wrapped in nothing but cold air and terror. A hostel worker found me minutes later, still shaking, barely able to talk. When I finally told them what happened, they exchanged a look. One that told me this wasn't the first time someone came up from that basement in shock. Later that night, someone taped a sign across the basement entrance. Shower area closed. Do not enter, maintenance required. But the real maintenance will never fix what I heard, or what touched me. I'm sure of it now, someone died down there. Maybe drowned, maybe trapped, maybe forgotten. And whatever's in those showers, it isn't finished. Last night, while I showered on the upper floor, clean, bright, safe, I heard humming, soft, gurgling, coming from the drain. I wasn't supposed to be awake that night. I had been traveling for almost 2 days, hopping between buses, terminals, and bad coffees. By the time I checked into the hostel, my body felt like it had been stitched together with exhaustion. I remember thinking I could sleep through a thunderstorm or an earthquake or both happening at once. But not through what I heard that night. The hostel was one of those cheap, narrow buildings squeezed between tall shops. The kind that looked like it would collapse if someone leaned too hard on the front door. But it was all I could afford on a backpacker's budget. I didn't care about comfort. I just needed a bed. The receptionist, a tired-looking guy with ink stains on his hands, handed me my key and said, "Night guard does rounds after midnight. Don't worry if you hear footsteps." I nodded at the time, thinking nothing of it. A place that old needed security, especially when half the doors didn't even latch properly. But later, one of the girls in my dorm laughed when I mentioned it. "This hostel doesn't have a night guard," she said. "Hasn't for years." I stared at her, confused. I heard footsteps last night. Yeah, she said quietly. Everyone hears them. Something about her expression made the temperature in the room drop a degree. She turned away as if she'd already said too much. I wanted to ask more, but sleep dragged me down before I could. The next night, Halloween night, I learned the truth. It was around 12:40 a.m. The hallway lights flickered under the weight of the old wiring, and a draft leaked in from somewhere behind the walls. Everyone else was asleep, their soft breathing drifting through the room like waves rising and falling. Couldn't sleep. Jet lag, maybe, or an unease that had been tightening in my chest since the evening. The kind that grows quietly under your ribs, unnoticed until you're suddenly wide awake with your heart tapping like fingertips on glass. I stepped into the hallway to get a drink from the shared kitchen. The corridor was strangely cold, like it didn't belong to the same building upstairs. The walls smelled of dust and age, layers of it as if nobody had scrubbed them clean in years. And then I heard it, shuffling, heavy, slow, the unmistakable sound of someone dragging their feet, coming from around the corner. At first, I was relieved. Okay, good. There was a night guard. The dorm girl must have been trying to freak me out. But when he came into view, everything inside me went still. He stood at the far end of the hallway, hunched slightly, leaning on an old metal torch, the long, thick kind from decades ago with a wide head and a deep yellow beam. His uniform looked outdated too, the fabric rough and faded, the badge rusted. Dust clung to him like a second skin. His boots were worn and scuffed, each step leaving a soft scrape on the tiles. He stopped when he saw me. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he turned his head slightly, lifting the beam toward his face. His face. I felt my heartbeat trip. His skin was slack, sagging, stretched over sharp cheekbones like it was too thin to hide what lay beneath. But it was his eyes, God, his eyes, that broke something inside me. Because he didn't have any. Just empty, shadowed hollows where they should have been. Deep sockets that swallowed the torchlight instead of reflecting it. He tilted his head, almost curious. You should go back to your room, he said. His voice was dry and hollow, like someone speaking through layers of dust. The tone wasn't threatening, it was worse. It was tired, old, like he had said the same thing 1,000 times and still no one listened. I'm just getting water, I whispered. He shook his head. The motion was jerky, unnatural. Not tonight. Not on this night. Before the others wake. The way he said others made my bones vibrate with a cold dread I didn't know was possible. It felt like the air itself recoiled around us. I stepped backward, hands trembling. He didn't move toward me, but his head followed, turning slowly, like he could see me even without eyes. Okay, I managed. I'm going. Good girl, he rasped. A sound like wind sliding through broken windows filled the hall as he resumed his slow, shuffling walk. The beam of his old torch dragged across the walls, brushing over chipped paint and faded notices. I ran back into my dorm and shut the door quietly, as if making noise would attract something. My heart thudded so loudly I was sure it would wake the whole building. The room felt colder, as though his presence had seeped through the walls. I crawled under my blanket. The thin fabric felt useless against the dread crawling under my skin. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to fall asleep, but the footsteps came back. Slow, dragging, growing heavier. The sound of boots sliding slightly on old tiles. They stopped outside my door. My breath caught. A hand, cold, heavy, pressed against the door from the other side. I could hear it, the soft creak of the wood bowing inward. My blanket suddenly felt like the only barrier keeping me alive, flimsy as it was. He didn't knock. He didn't call my name. He just stood there, breathing. I could hear it. A faint, rattling inhale like lungs filled with dust. Minutes passed. Long ones. Or maybe it was only seconds. My mind kept spinning around the same question. What did he mean by before the others wake? Eventually, the footsteps moved away, not fading softly, dragged, pulled, like someone being forced to walk rather than choosing to. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, I didn't leave my bed until the sun started pushing weak light through the curtains. Then the screaming started. 2 rooms down, a girl was yelling for help. When people rushed to her door, she was standing in the middle of the room, shaking uncontrollably, pointing at the bunk opposite hers. The bed was empty. The backpack was still there. Shoes still neatly placed. Phone charging. The guest was gone. Vanishings weren't exactly unheard of in hostels. People woke up early, left quietly, checked out without bothering anyone. But this was different. The girl kept repeating the same words over and over until her voice cracked. He followed someone. I saw him. I saw him leading them away. The CCTV footage confirmed it. The night guard uniform, boots, torchlight, leading a guest down the hallway. Except the hostel manager stared at the screen, pale as chalk. "We haven't had a night guard since 1998, he whispered. They pulled out the old records. The night guard from that year had died of a heart attack. Alone. Midnight rounds. Found the next morning in the hallway. Torso stiff, eyes wide open, sockets sunken. As if something had taken what filled them. I packed my bags that afternoon. I didn't look back. I didn't sleep the next night or the night after that. But last week, in a different city, in a different hostel, I woke to the sound of slow, dragging footsteps outside my door. A single tap on the wood. And a voice, dry, hollow, ancient, whispered, "Before the others wake." I checked into the hostel after midnight, exhausted, sweating, and just wanting a place to crash. I'd been backpacking across the north for weeks, and this was the cheapest place I could find on short notice. The receptionist barely looked up from her phone when I signed in. She slid a keycard toward me and said, almost too casually, "You're in room 14, bunk bed 6B, lower bunk." I didn't think much of it until she added, "If you want to switch beds later, just tell me." "Why would I?" I asked, forcing a laugh. She didn't answer. She just returned to her phone. I should have taken that as a warning. Room 14 was a long, narrow dorm with 6 bunk beds. Most of them were occupied. Bags piled up, shoes scattered, towels hanging from the rails. The air was thick with the smell of damp clothes, deodorant, and someone's instant noodles. My bunk, 6B, was tucked into the far corner, right under a flickering bulb that hummed like it was struggling to stay alive. The top bunk, 6A, was empty. Good, I thought. I'd have some peace. I set my backpack down and crawled under the thin blanket. The mattress springs creaked loudly, echoing in the quiet room. Someone was snoring softly near the door. The bulb above me buzzed and twitched, casting shaky shadows along the ceiling. Despite all that, exhaustion pulled me under. But I didn't stay asleep. I jolted awake to a sudden dip in the mattress above me. It was subtle, like someone had just eased their weight onto the top bunk. For a split second, I assumed another guest had checked in late. Then I remembered the receptionist's expression. I held my breath and listened. The room was silent except for the soft snoring near the front. But above me, dust drifted down through the wooden slats, brushing my face like powder. The mattress shifted again, very gently, like someone was adjusting themselves. I whispered upward, "Hello!" No answer. I slowly slid out of my blanket, peering toward the ladder. Nobody was climbing it. Nobody was on it. The top bunk curtain was half drawn, swaying slightly as if touched by a breeze. But the air in the room was still and stale. A chill crept down my spine, the kind that doesn't come from cold but from instinct. I lay back down, telling myself it was probably just the old frame settling. Hostels have crappy beds. Everyone knows that. Then the sound began. A slow, deliberate scratching. Fingernails dragging across wood. Back and forth, directly above my head. First, I froze. I didn't even blink. Every hair on my arms stood up. My breath felt trapped in my throat. The scratching got slower, deeper. I could hear individual grains of wood catching under the nails. It wasn't random movement. It wasn't the frame shifting. This was purposeful. I pushed myself up onto my elbows. "Who's up there?" I said louder this time, No answer. But the scratching stopped abruptly. Then, a soft exhale filtered down through the slats. Not wind, not the pipes. A human breath, raspy, strained, wet. It was followed by a faint whisper, impossible to make out, like someone speaking from behind a wall. My heart hammered so violently I felt it in my tongue. Enough. I needed to see. I placed my feet on the lower mattress, stood carefully, and lifted myself up until my eyes were just level with the top bunk. The room seemed to darken as I raised my head, like the shadows stretched inward, pooling around the bunk. And then I saw it. Someone was lying there, perfectly still. Not asleep, just horizontal, staring straight upward at the ceiling. Their face was barely visible in the dim light, but what I could see was wrong. Blurred, like watching a reflection on disturbed water. Their features shifted, dissolved, reformed. Nose melting into cheek, eyes sliding out of place, a mouth stretching too wide before snapping back. Couldn't breathe, couldn't even blink. The figure's head twitched, then very slowly, very deliberately, turned toward me. The distortion intensified, the face rippling like static on a broken screen. I couldn't make out eyes, but I felt them lock onto me. A pressure built in the room, as if the air had thickened. My ears rang. Then it opened its mouth. Not wide, not dramatically, just enough for a dry, grainy whisper to slip out. "You're in my bed." I stumbled back so fast I fell onto the lower mattress. My head hit the wall. Pain flashed, but adrenaline drowned it out. I scrambled toward the aisle, nearly tripping on someone's backpack. The bunk above creaked violently, more movement in a single second than before. I fled the room. The hallway outside was empty, cold, and humming faintly from the old electrical system. I pressed my back against the wall, chest heaving. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead like warning signs. I stayed there for several minutes, trying to steady my breath. When I finally returned to the reception desk, the same girl looked up, startled. "You left the room?" she asked quietly. "Did you see something?" The way she said it, too knowing, too casual, made my stomach drop. "What the hell is wrong with that bunk?" I demanded. There was someone up there. Her face tightened. No one should have been in 6A. Well, someone was. No, her voice dropped to a whisper. Not someone. I stared at her. She exhaled shakily and leaned closer. 3 years ago, a backpacker named Imran was staying in the top bunk of 6B, the one above yours. He complained that something kept waking him at night, that someone kept climbing into his bed. She swallowed. Nobody believed him. I felt my skin crawl. "They found him dead one morning," she continued. "No injuries, no struggle, nothing. He just never woke up." She rubbed her arms as if cold. "Since then, anyone who sleeps in the bottom bunk says they feel someone above them. And the few who climbed up to look," she hesitated, "they didn't stay long." I felt the blood drain from my face. "I want another bed," I said. "You can have one," she whispered. "But don't go back for your stuff tonight." "Why not?" She didn't answer. She just stared over my shoulder. Slowly, I turned. The hallway behind me was empty, but the air felt occupied. I could feel the stare before I even saw the shadow move across the wall, long, stretched, dripping downward like melting ink, coming from the direction of room 14. I didn't go back. I didn't sleep. In the morning, when I returned with the receptionist, the top bunk was perfectly made. My bag was untouched. Nothing looked disturbed, except for one thing, a faint set of scratches, fresh ones, etched into the wooden slats above 6B, right over where my head had been. I've stayed in dozens of cheap hostels, but there's one I will never forget. One that still crawls into my dreams like smoke seeping under a locked door. I ended up there because every other place in the city was fully booked for Halloween weekend. My friends and I were traveling cheap, looking for somewhere we could crash after exploring the night markets and maybe watching some horror movies. We weren't expecting luxury. We weren't expecting what we found. The hostel looked normal enough from the outside, 3 stories tall, peeling paint, flickering sign. But when we stepped inside, the air felt off, heavy, as if the building was holding its breath. I remember the old man at the reception warning us, "Lights out by midnight tonight, and stay away from the recreation room. It stays locked for a reason." We laughed it off. Travelers always get spooky warnings. Half of them are jokes or traditions, but something in his voice wasn't joking. And the recreation room, it was tucked at the end of the hallway, door bolted shut, windows boarded from the inside. Felt like a sealed tomb. I should have trusted my instincts then. But curiosity has always been my downfall. The first strange thing happened around 11:40 p.m. We were in our room, playing cards, when faint music drifted through the hallway. A nostalgic, crackling melody, like something from an old gramophone. Soft laughter followed, then the patter of footsteps. My friend Sarah paused mid-deal. "Are they throwing a party?" "They said they don't do Halloween parties anymore," I replied. But the music was definitely coming from the recreation room. We exchanged looks, the irresponsible kind, the adventurous kind. "Let's check," someone whispered, and of course I agreed. The hallway lights buzzed overhead as we crept toward the locked room. The smell of dust thickened the closer we got. But beneath it, something else. Something burnt. I told myself it was my imagination. When we reached the recreation room door, we froze. The lock, an old brass padlock, was hanging open. Someone had unlatched it, or something. Inside, music played louder now. A slow, festive tune, warped as if time had chewed it up and spat it out. Light pulsed softly under the door, like candle flames swaying. Sarah whispered, "No one else heard this all night?" Seriously. Her breath fogged the air. The hallway wasn't cold. Only this spot, right by the door. My hand moved on its own. Pushed it open. The smell hit first. Smoke, old decorations, and something sweet, like burnt sugar. The room looked preserved, like a photograph left untouched for years. Halloween banners hung from the ceiling, their paper edges curled but intact. Plastic pumpkins glowed dimly. A long table held bowls filled with melted candy, now hardened into strange shapes. Confetti clung to the floor like ash, and people, dozens of them, moved between the shadows. I didn't see their faces at first, just silhouettes dancing slowly, as if underwater. Their movements were too smooth, too silent, like puppets dragged by invisible strings. "Hello," Sarah called out nervously. The dancers didn't react. We stepped inside. The air felt denser, warmer. Every breath hurt a little, scraping my throat with a faint burn taste. A woman in an old witch costume drifted past me, her skirt brushing my leg with a dry, brittle texture. When I turned toward her, she continued dancing. No acknowledgement, no pause. Another figure wore a jester mask, half melted on one side. He swayed in circles, head tilting unnaturally far back. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. "This is a prank," one of my friends said. "It has to be." But there was no prank in the smell tightening my throat. The smell of fire. The music warped suddenly, glitching and stretching, the melody bending into a distorted whine. The lights flickered from soft orange to a sickly dark red. That's when the dancers started turning toward us. Slowly, together, in perfect, unnatural unison. My stomach dropped. The woman in the witch costume lifted her face, or what was left of it. Her skin was cracked and blackened, peeling away from bone. Her hair hung in clumps. Her eyes were hollow pockets of frozen ash. Smoke curled from her mouth. Someone screamed behind me. One of the dancers, a tall man wearing a burnt suit, walked toward my friend Adil. His shoes clicked against the floor even though his legs didn't bend properly, like he wasn't using joints at all. I whispered to myself, "This isn't real. This can't be real." But then the burnt man reached for Adil, and the sleeve of his suit disintegrated into ash as his hand touched my friend's chest. Adil gasped. His shirt scorched instantly, fabric curling. He shoved the man away, and the burnt figure stumbled back, but not like a living person would. He fell in reverse motion, as if rewinding before snapping back upright. That's when the masked guest approached me. He wore a cracked porcelain mask. The paint melted down like tears. His clothes were charred and clung to his body like molten plastic. He stopped inches from me. I felt no breath from him, only heat, radiating from him like a dying furnace. Slowly, he lifted his mask. I wish I could forget what was underneath. His face was melted, literally melted. Skin fused into uneven lumps, eyes shriveled like burned grapes. His lips were torn and blistered, but he smiled, a wet, stretched smile. And in a voice that sounded like burning wood, he whispered, "We've been waiting for you to join us." I stumbled back, almost tripping over a fallen banner. The room darkened further as the shadows deepened, swallowing corners of the space. The music turned into something unrecognizable, a warped blend of laughter, screaming, and static. The dancers advanced, arms reaching, faces blistered and glowing with embers. "We need to go," Sarah shouted, grabbing my wrist. We ran. The exit door slammed shut behind us the second we crossed the threshold. The padlock relatched itself with a metallic snap. We didn't stay to question it. We didn't even pack. We just ran out of the hostel, half-dressed, gasping for air, the cold night outside burning our lungs after the suffocating heat inside. At the gate, the old receptionist stood, watching us. His expression wasn't surprised. He just said quietly, "You shouldn't have opened that door." We spent the night in a cafe, too afraid to sleep. By morning, we returned with police. The recreation room was different. No decorations, no lights, no music, no figures, only black scorch marks on the walls, and smeared handprints, dozens of them, burned into the floor, leading in circles like people had danced there long after dying. I still dream of their faces, and sometimes, when I wake up late at night, I swear I smell smoke clinging to my clothes, as if something followed me out, as if the party never ended. I wasn't supposed to stay in that hostel. It was a last-minute booking after my original place canceled due to maintenance issues. By the time I found another option, everything else in my budget was filled. This hostel, an old converted townhouse, was the only one with a free bed left. I arrived late, exhausted from travel, just wanting to lie down. The receptionist barely looked up when I checked in. He slid a key toward me and muttered, "Room 12, bed 3. Try not to move the furniture." It was such a strange comment that I almost asked what he meant, but his blank stare made me keep quiet. Room 12 was small, with 4 bunk beds and a single lamp flickering in the corner. The place smelled like damp carpet and old paint, nothing unusual for a cheap hostel. My bed 3 was the lower bunk closest to the back wall. The wall itself caught my attention immediately. A long crack ran from the floor almost to the ceiling, jagged and dark, like something had once pushed from the inside. When I placed my bag down, a faint puff of dust fell from it. The plaster looked soft enough to crumble if touched. I didn't think much of it at first. Old buildings have cracks. Old hostels have worse. The first night I slept early. Around 2 a.m. I woke to a sound. Knocking. Soft, rhythmic, coming from the cracked wall right behind my head. 3 dull taps, pause, 3 more. I sat up, heart thumping. I thought maybe it was plumbing or someone in the room next door. But the sound didn't echo. It was direct, close, sharply defined like knuckles on hollow wood. I pressed my ear to the wall. Tap, tap, tap. I pulled away immediately. The knocks had synced with my breathing, starting softly, then matching every inhale. I didn't sleep again that night. In the morning, I asked the receptionist if someone was fixing pipes or repairing something. "There are no pipes in that wall," he said without looking at me. "And no neighboring room, just storage." His tone made the hairs on my arms rise. That night, the knocking came earlier. Still soft, still steady. This time, I tried to ignore it. I put in headphones, turned on an audiobook, and tried to sleep. But the tapping grew a little louder, just enough for my imagination to fill the silence between each knock. I told myself it was nothing. Old buildings crack, settle, breathe. Except buildings don't whisper. On the third night, Halloween night, the knocks began again. But this time, after a long pause, a new sound followed. A whisper, faint, raspy, right behind the wall. Move the bed. I shot upright, my back slamming against the opposite wall. My whole body prickled with cold. I held my breath, listening. The whisper came again, clearer, more desperate. Move the bed. My hands shook. I turned on my phone flashlight, shining it at the cracked plaster. Dust fell gently from the crack, as if someone behind it had brushed their fingers along the inside. I knew I should leave the room, wake the others, go to reception, anything. But the whisper kept repeating, urgent now, like someone drowning beneath floorboards. Move the bed, move the bed, move the bed. I don't know what force pushed me to do it. Curiosity, fear, or the sickening pressure of being watched. But I grabbed the metal frame and pulled. The bed scraped loudly across the floor, and the moment it moved a few inches away, something inside the wall shifted. A hole, small, circular, appeared where the crack had widened. Then more plaster fell away, crumbling like stale bread. A narrow opening emerged, not just a hole, a crawling space, just big enough for a person to squeeze through. The air that escaped from inside it was cold and wet, carrying a smell like moldy fabric and something metallic, something like blood. I leaned closer despite myself, flashlight trembling in my hand. Inside, the crawl space stretched into darkness. The walls looked freshly scraped, plaster torn away in long claw-like grooves. And then something moved. A pale shape pressed against the inside of the hole. Fingers, thin, grayish fingers, reaching, trembling, pushing through the cracked plaster. Then a whole hand emerged. It was swollen, bruised, nails broken down to the flesh. Dust caked under the skin as it clawed its way out. I staggered back, hitting the opposite bunk with my shoulder. The fingers stretched toward me, opening and closing slowly like a dying spider. A whisper drifted out again. This time not pleading, but choking, like someone suffocating inches from my face. Please help. I ran. I bolted down the hallway, stumbling over my own feet, nearly slipping as I turned toward reception. I banged on the desk, shouting for help. The old receptionist woke with a start, eyes wide. What did you do? He croaked. Someone's in the wall, I yelled. Someone is crawling out. His expression changed to horror, but not the kind fueled by surprise. It was recognition. Where? He demanded. In my room, behind the bed. There's a hole. He was already moving, grabbing a set of keys and rushing toward the stairs with surprising speed. We reached the room in seconds. But when I opened the door, the bed was back in its place, pushed flush against the wall, exactly how it had been when I arrived. The plaster looked untouched, no crack, no crumbling edges, just smooth, unbroken wall. You're lying, the receptionist snapped, but I barely heard him. My eyes were on the ground, because something new was there, a trail, dark red prints smeared on the floor, dragging across the tiles, leading from the wall around the bed frame and stopping directly beside mine. Human prints, bloody, wet, fresh. I felt my knees weaken. The receptionist backed away, muttering something under his breath before rushing down the hall, either to call someone or to escape what we both saw. The other guests were waking, confused, but I didn't stay to explain. I grabbed my bag and left the hostel without even checking out. I've never slept in a bunk bed again, and sometimes, late at night, I wake up certain I can hear knocking, muffled and patient. Tap, 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 like someone trying to find me again. I'm Bilal, 23 years old, and at the time all I wanted was a cheap place to stay while finishing my final semester in Lahore. My university was too far from home, and the hostel rates closer to campus were ridiculous. So when someone told me about Cheyenne Girls and Boys Hostel, which, despite the name, was actually just a small co-ed building run by a middle-aged woman, I took the chance. The first time I saw Miss Cheyenne, she was standing in the doorway like she had been waiting for me specifically. Her smile was wide, too wide. Not warm exactly, more like painted on. Her lips stretched so tightly it looked painful. "Welcome, Beta," she said. "Here, we take care of our guests." I didn't notice anything strange then. I was tired. She was friendly. But even as she handed me the keys, her smile didn't move. Not once. Not even when she blinked. I shrugged it off. Lots of people wear fake smiles when running a business. But there was something else, something people whispered about. They said she never slept. Ever. And at first I laughed at the idea. Nobody stays awake for days on end. But after 2 weeks I realized I had never, not once, seen her go into her room, or come out, or even sit down. She was just always there. Standing, watching, listening. Even late at night when I went to get water, she'd be at the reception desk, sitting perfectly upright, hands folded, eyes open. I thought maybe she had insomnia, or maybe she was extremely dedicated to her job. I didn't know how wrong I was. The night everything happened was Halloween. Not that we celebrate it like the West does, but the date carried a strange weight anyway. It was stormy, power lines unstable. The wind was cold, sharp, and I remember wishing the hostel had better insulation. Around 1:30 a.m., the building plunged into complete darkness. The fans stopped. The distant hum of electricity died. Even the street outside went dead. No headlights, no neon signs, nothing but storm clouds and shifting shadows. I groaned, slipped on my slippers, and stepped out to check if anyone else was awake. The hallway was darker than I'd ever seen it. Humid. The air felt thick, like someone was breathing over my shoulder. A single emergency bulb flickered weakly on the far end, but it wasn't enough to see clearly. I debated going back, but then I heard it. "Bye, Lael." My name. Soft, drawn out, almost playful. I froze. Lightning cracked outside, illuminating the hallway for a split second. That's when I saw her. Miss Cheyenne stood at the very end of the corridor, perfectly still, hands by her sides, facing me. Her smile somehow looked wider in the darkness. When the lightning faded, she disappeared again into black. I held my breath. Another flash. She was closer, half the distance gone. Her face was pale and stretched, eyes wider than normal, as if the darkness behind them was pushing outward. Her jaw hung slightly open, trembling, like she was struggling to speak or hold something back. The hallway dropped into darkness again. I backed up slowly, feeling the rough wall under my palm, grounding myself. My breath came in shallow, uneven bursts. Another flash. She was right there, only a few feet from me. Her neck jerked unnaturally, head twitching as if something inside her was trying to break free. Her eyes locked onto mine. Huge, black, bottomless. The light went out again, swallowing her. I didn't wait. I ran. My heart slammed against my ribs as I sprinted to my door. I could actually feel, the air move behind me like someone was gliding instead of running. My hands shook violently as I jammed the key into the lock and stumbled inside. The door slammed shut with a hollow thud. I locked it, then bolted it, then pushed my chair against it. My room was pitch black. The rain hammered against the window. Thunder rolled across the sky, shaking the building. I pressed my eye against the peephole. First, I saw nothing. Then the emergency light flickered faintly, and she stepped into view. Slowly, deliberately, her face came right up to the door, the distorted peephole stretching her features into something monstrous. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Her jaw trembled. Then, "We wake when the lights go out." Her whisper seeped through the door as if the wood didn't exist. Her fingers scraped across the doorframe, nails digging deep, slow, deliberate. The sound was sharp and wet, like claws carving fresh bark. I stumbled back from the door, chest tight. My phone's battery was dead. I had no way to call anyone. All I could do was sit there in the dark, every muscle rigid, listening to her nails scrape, 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 until the storm finally moved away and dawn crept into the sky. When the power returned, I waited a solid hour before opening the door. The hallway was empty, silent, but the door frame, the wood was shredded, gouges deep enough to fit my entire finger inside. Long, ragged claw marks tore through the frame, splinters scattered like shells after an explosion. Without thinking, I packed my bag in 10 minutes flat. I didn't even bother checking out. I just walked to the reception area, shaking with adrenaline. The desk was empty. The seat was empty. But the cushion held the shape of someone sitting there for years, an imprint so deep it looked carved. I never saw her leave the building, never saw her sleeping, never once caught her off guard. She was always just there, until last night when she wasn't. But here's the part that still chills me. As I walked out the gate, I glanced back at the building, and there she was, standing inside the glass entrance, perfectly still, smile stretched, eyes wide, watching me leave. I ran. I didn't stop until I was out of the neighborhood. 2 days later, I heard from another student that the hostel had permanently shut down due to maintenance issues. They didn't know the real reason. They didn't see the claw marks. They never heard her whisper, but I did. And sometimes, during power outages, I swear I still hear her voice brushing against the dark. We wake when the lights go out. I didn't believe the rumors about Hostel Zamana. Every place with cheap beds and flickering hallway lights had urban legends, and this one was no different. People said the main glass door clicked open at 2:59 a.m. every Halloween, never a second early or late, as if obeying some invisible appointment. I only ended up there because all the university girls' hostels were full, and I needed something cheap for a week while my internship started. My room was on the second floor, right above the front desk. The walls were thin enough that I could hear late-night check-ins, whispered arguments, and the buzzing door whenever someone entered. But on the night it happened, Halloween night, the hostel was unusually silent. I remember lying in my bunk staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The air felt heavy, damp almost, as if someone had left a wet towel lying somewhere. I kept checking the time on my phone for no reason. 2:55 a.m. I told myself I'd be asleep before 3. But then the smell hit me. A cold, earthy, rotten smell, like wet leaves and mud that had been fermenting in darkness. It seeped through the corridor, sliding under my door. It was so sudden and strong that it made my eyes water. I sat up, heart thumping. What the hell? And then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, uneven, dragging. Not the typical rubber slippers or flip-flops hostel guests wore. This was heavier, sloppier, like boots filled with water being lifted one painful step at a time. I slipped out of bed and cracked my door open. The hallway was dim, lit only by the emergency bulbs that hummed overhead with a sickly yellow glow. Downstairs, I heard the front door buzzer. BZZZZZT. I checked my phone. 2:59 a.m. My stomach dropped. Holding my breath, I stepped quietly into the hall and leaned over the railing, staring down at the reception desk. The receptionist on shift, Adil, a friendly guy who always offered extra tea bags, stood frozen behind the counter. His face was pale, his hands trembling. Opposite him stood someone, tall, still, completely soaked. Water dripped from their sleeves, forming a small, growing puddle on the tiles. Their clothes were wrong, not old-fashioned exactly, but outdated, from a style that belonged to decades long gone. The fabric clung to them like it had been underwater for hours. Their hair was long, thick, and hanging forward, drenched and covering their face entirely. Not a single feature was visible beneath it. Adil held out a room key with a shaking hand. "Our room 12, he whispered. The figure didn't lift their head. They simply reached out a pale, waterlogged hand and took the key. Their fingers were shriveled, pruned like skin left in water too long. As they turned, they passed the hallway where I stood watching. And that's when the cold hit me. Not ordinary cold, not AC cold. Something ancient, river deep, death-soaked. It washed over me like invisible water. They walked right past my staircase, and for a split second, the air smelled like algae and river stones, and something metallic underneath. I tried to swallow, but my throat was dry. Every instinct screamed at me to get inside my room, lock the door, and pretend nothing happened. But curiosity rooted me in place. I watched the figure drag themselves down the hall toward room 12. Their footsteps left faint wet prints on the tiles. Not heavy droplets. More like the floor absorbing the water as soon as it touched. The door to room 12 creaked open without them touching the knob. I flinched. Then the figure slipped inside, the door closing behind them with a soft, final thud. I didn't realize I'd been gripping the railing until my fingers went numb. Adil suddenly collapsed onto the reception chair, burying his face in his hands. I rushed downstairs. "What was that?" I whispered urgently. He looked up, eyes red, voice barely audible. "You shouldn't have watched." "Adil, who was that?" He shook his head slowly. "Not who. What?" Before I could ask more, another guest entered the lobby yawning, and Adil immediately straightened, forcing a normal expression. I understood the message. He wouldn't say another word. Not here, not with others around. I stayed awake the rest of the night, jumping at every creak of the hallway. But nothing else happened. By morning, sunlight filled the corridors, warming everything with a fake sense of safety. People moved around lazily. Someone laughed while brushing their teeth. Someone else asked for breakfast. I found Adil in the back courtyard. "What happened last night?" I asked again. He looked at me like he was choosing whether to lie. Then he sighed. "You know the old river hostel? The one that closed 20 years ago?" "Yeah. The one where all those guests drowned." He nodded. "Every Halloween, someone checks in here. Someone who never survived that night." A chill crawled up my neck. "Ghosts check in." "Not ghosts," he whispered. "Something worse. Something that doesn't know it's dead." I felt sick. "What do they want?" He hesitated. "A room, place to sleep. But they never stay until dawn." "And last night? Room 12. He swallowed hard. "That room has been empty for months, locked from the outside. No one should have been able to open it." The world tilted for a moment. I hurried straight to room 12. The door was open, wide open. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I pushed it further. Inside, the bed was soaked. Not wet, flooded. It looked like a body had lain there dripping all night, leaving a dark, spreading stain across the mattress. The smell of river mud was suffocating. I stepped closer, and that's when I saw it. A key. An old, rusted room key lying on the pillow. Not one of ours. The tag was metal, worn green from age, with faint engraved numbers. River Hostel / Room 4. My vision blurred. That hostel was abandoned. The river had claimed it decades ago. The building sat half-submerged now, swallowed by reeds and water. I backed away, stumbling into the hallway. Adil stood behind me, face gray. "It happens every year," he whispered. "At 2:59. They come here instead of going back to the river, looking for a room they never reached, for a night they never escaped." I stared at the rusty key, pulse thundering. "What do we do with it?" Adil shook his head. Before he could answer, a wet footprint appeared on the hallway floor, then another, leading away from room 12, turning the corner, heading straight toward the stairwell that led to the upper floors. My floor, my room, every hair on my arms stood up. "They never stay until dawn," Adil repeated shakily. "But sometimes they come back looking for who saw them." I felt the temperature drop sharply, the air tightening around my lungs. Somewhere above us, a door clicked open. Soft, dragging footsteps followed, growing louder, coming closer. I didn't wait. I ran. I've always been skeptical about haunted hostels. Cheap rooms, creaky floors, old paint. That's enough to make anyone imagine ghosts. But when I booked room 9 at the Crescent Hostel for a weekend stay, I didn't expect anything truly terrifying. I was just a tired traveler looking for a cheap bed and a quiet night. At first glance, room 9 seemed normal. A single bed tucked against the far wall, a small window letting in a dull glow from the street lamp, and a wooden floor that creaked slightly under each step. The air smelled faintly of mildew and varnish. Nothing more. I unpacked, lay my jacket over the chair, and thought nothing of the faint scratches I noticed on the walls. probably just from previous guests. The first night was uneventful, though I did wake once to the feeling that something was off. My bag was on the floor where I'd left it, but the chair had moved an inch closer to the bed. I told myself I was imagining things. Old buildings shift. Furniture does too. By the second night, I started noticing more subtle oddities. The mirror across from my bed fogged up even when the window was open, the condensation curling from the inside rather than the outside. I wiped it, expecting my reflection to be normal, but my hand passed through the fog as if through steam, and I could swear it felt warm. Not glass warm, skin warm. I laughed nervously and shook my head. I was tired. Maybe I had been working too hard, traveling too much. My mind was playing tricks. Then Halloween night came. The hostel was crowded, filled with people partying downstairs, laughing, and wearing costumes that echoed through the thin walls. I tried to sleep, but I couldn't ignore the growing tension in room 9. The space felt smaller, not in a literal sense, but in the way the air pressed against my chest, making it harder to breathe. The walls seemed to inch closer with every passing hour, the bed feeling tighter against my back, the ceiling lower above my head. I lay in bed, listening. The laughter and music from downstairs seemed distant, as though muffled under layers of water. That's when I heard it, a subtle, deliberate breathing from behind the mirror. Slow, methodical. I froze. "Hello," I whispered. No reply. I tried to convince myself it was my own imagination. A draft? Pipes settling? But the temperature near the mirror grew warmer as I watched, the fog inside curling into strange, writhing patterns, almost like letters forming and dissolving before my eyes. Couldn't resist. I touched the mirror. It was warm, like skin. A shiver ran down my spine. The warmth spread across my fingertips, pulsing as if the mirror was alive, as if it was breathing in sync with the sound I'd been hearing. Then the face appeared. It pressed against the other side, not a reflection but a person or something resembling one. The features were distorted, blurred like water rippling, but the eyes were hollow, screaming silently. I stumbled back, heart hammering, but the room was smaller now. The walls seemed closer, the bed pressing against me more firmly, and the mirror's surface rippled like liquid under my gaze. I reached for the door. It wouldn't open. I twisted the handle, pushed, yanked, but the door felt glued shut, as if the room itself had become a trap. Panic surged. My eyes darted around, searching for something, anything, a window, a way out. But the window seemed farther than before, narrower, almost unreachable. Then I heard it, a whisper, faint at first, almost drowned out by my own ragged breathing. "We've been waiting to take someone back with us." It came again, louder, surrounding me, echoing off the walls as if the room itself was speaking. The mirror began to fog from the inside more rapidly, thick swirls forming shapes I couldn't comprehend. Shadows moved behind the glass, hands pressing against the surface, reaching, clawing, as if trying to pull themselves through. Couldn't breathe. My lungs burned. I pounded on the door, screamed, yelled for anyone downstairs, but no sound reached the party below. The walls pressed tighter. My bed sank lower beneath me, the ceiling pressing like a heavy lid. And then the face pressed harder against the mirror. Its mouth opened in a silent scream, stretching impossibly, the edges of its face blurring, twisting, until it looked like every person who had ever disappeared in the world, all layered into one impossible visage. His eyes fixed on mine. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. The whisper grew into a chorus, dozens of voices, hissing and crying, chanting in unison. "Come back! Come back! We've been waiting." The air was wet and metallic, smelling like damp earth and rusted chains. My skin crawled, hair standing on end. My fingers brushed against the mirror again, and this time it was soft. Soft and yielding, like it was stretching toward me. I jerked back, tripping over the bed. I tried the door again. Locked. I screamed, kicked, battered it with my shoulder, but the room seemed to pulse around me. The walls flexed, shrinking, compressing. My knees hit the floor, My palms scraped the wooden surface as I crawled toward the window. The mirror fogged completely, the surface bulging outward, distorting light and shadow. Then, slowly, impossibly, something emerged. A hand, thin, long, pale, tipped with black nails, pressed against the glass. Then an arm, a shoulder, a twisting torso. The face, the same one, pushed through, lips moving silently. The chorus of whispers grew louder. I ran to the opposite corner, chest heaving, heartbeat deafening in my ears. The room shrank again. My bed pressed against my legs. The walls inched closer, the ceiling lowering. I could feel them around me, not just the spirits in the mirror, but the room itself, a living, breathing entity. I understood then. The room didn't want me to leave. It had been waiting. Every night, every guest who stayed, it had been measuring, watching, shrinking the space, coaxing, preparing. I don't know how long I sat there, trembling. Morning light filtered in weakly, and the room relaxed slightly, expanding just enough for me to breathe. The mirror was normal again, flat and cold, reflecting only my pale, wide-eyed face. I didn't sleep. I packed silently, left the key on the bedside table, and ran. To this day, I can't stop thinking about it. I know the room still exists, somewhere, waiting for the next guest, for the next night, for the next Halloween. Sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I can feel the walls inching closer, and I can hear the whispers. We've been waiting to take someone back with us.